Welcome to everyone. This is another one of our Saturdays web meetups with Josh. Josh Dickson is a psychologist, and he works he works in therapy retreats, and he's also doing like private practice. And he works for Resurface, which is the retreats that I will put very soon on the chat for those of you who want to check it. Resurface.uk. And today's topic is going to be savoring positive emotions. So the context here is that every Saturday, Josh is dealing with a different topic, but the theme is how to be able to deal with this difficult situation, and also how to be what the science and the science of psychology is telling us about living a better life. Just a short pitch for Monday's meetup, and I'm doing it today because it's going to be slightly different than usual. So on Monday, we have epidemiologist and Dr. Amy Adalja, but it's not going to be one of the usual meetups where there's a presentation and then we ask questions. Because Dr. Adalja hasn't got, his time is limited, he's only going to be around for 1 hour. So if you have questions, you have to send them to Razi in advance. So I'm posting the meetup details. So anyone who wants to ask a question to Dr. Amy Adalja, you will have to send your question in advance to Razi. Of course, we might still have time during that meetup for live questions. And closing the parenthesis, I'm also posting the link for resurfaceuk.com, which is Josh's, shall I call it retreat company? Is this a proper name?
Right, so it's called Resurface. Yeah, so it's not it's not called Resurface UK.
Oh, sorry.
It's just Resurface. The UK is just on the web address because you couldn't get resurface.com.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
yeah,
resurface.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Josh, the floor is yours.
Today, in the previous talks, I've been talking a lot about various ways of talking about productivity and certain interventions we can use to be more effective in the lockdown, and we're talking about flow states and grit and many of these topics. And today I wanted to go back to positive emotion, which previously I had said you can develop more positive emotion by practicing gratitude and writing a blessings journal. So just to recap, a gratitude list would be something like where you write down 3 things that you're grateful for and why. And it's always useful to try and expand your gratitude and vary it up. So, you might one day write that you're really grateful to Steve Jobs, and you're really grateful to live in London, and you're really grateful to have had a good education, something like that. And then the next day you might be grateful for your health. And it's very important to keep mixing it up, because if you don't, it becomes rote, and then it loses its effect. But that generates a lot of positive emotion. And then blessings journals are the one where ideally you write it the night before, but sometimes the next morning, 3 things that went well for you and why. And again, that generates positive emotion. But I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about positive emotion today. So what is positive emotion? If you want to really learn about emotions in general and the causal effect of emotions, I really point you towards, and maybe someone could put it in the chat, but Harry Binswanger's talks on emotions that are on the Ayn Rand campus, absolutely amazing. And I don't want to say really or repeat anything that he said, except that primarily our emotions are a response, so a somatic response to our thinking, and positive emotions in general are based around what we value, and negative emotions are around the threat to our values. And then I just want to leave that as kind of the given. And if you want to explore that, please listen to Harry Binswanger's excellent lectures on emotions. But today I wanted to start off by contrasting positive and negative emotions, what they actually do to you and the use of them. And a lot of people argue that emotions are what make us act. And negative emotions, I'll start with them, because culturally we seem to be much more focused on negative emotion. We seem to have within our culture, we tend to have a much greater understanding of all the different negative emotions. When I run groups, I'll often say to the members of the group, like, how many of you could name me 10 negative emotions? And they'll do it like that. And they could keep going more and more and more with negative emotions. And then I say, okay, and I'll contrast that and say, how many of you can name me all the positive emotions? A few people say things like happiness. And I'll say, well, happiness is such a broad term. Can you be a little bit more specific? And they might say joy. And then they usually get stuck. And the whole room is usually around that. And some people might say calm. Yeah. And so just, you know, that there is this focus or lack of focus on positive emotion in general. You know, we're not really brought up to really identify them. A lot of us are told as kids to, you know, particularly if you come from more religious backgrounds, to put that sort of stuff away. You know, life is about suffering, not about joy and happiness. But what do negative emotions do? Because negative emotions in themselves aren't bad. They generate a form of action. And when, so for example, if I'm anxious, I'll tend to have a very sort of, and highly anxious, I'll have a strong feeling around my heart center. And my focus and my body language tends to go inwards. And really what negative emotions do is they focus the mind usually on a singular task or a set of simple things that need to be done and acted upon very quickly. So I haven't filed my tax return and it needs to be in on Friday and it's Thursday and I'm anxious because I'm going to be losing a load of money and I know it's going to eat into my time and I'm scared that maybe it's a bit more than I had budgeted for or something like that. And then when I get it done, you know, my focus is all in on that and everything else is pretty much blocked out. That focus and drive to get it done and then is relieved when I've done it. So negative emotions usually push you towards doing something quickly to sort something out, the threat to your values, the threat to your life in one way. And there's a gradation of that. And again, I refer you back to Dr. Binswanger's lectures on emotions to really get a grip on the understanding of the intensity of emotion versus the level of value to you. But so negative emotions drive that kind of action. And if you look at all the negative emotions and the body language that goes with them, they're nearly always insular, focused in. There's usually a sense of tension and so on. Positive emotion does something else. When you experience positive emotion, it opens you up. And this is what Dr. Fredrickson called the broadening effect. When someone's expressing any form of joy and so on, the shoulders tend to go back, the head goes back, the eyes open more, the ears are in, you know, your hearing is enhanced. Actually, you find that all the senses are enhanced in many ways. And positive emotions allow a huge amount of information to come in, and then it allows you to see connections. You know, when you're flooded with dopamine, you see more connections, etc. And so positive emotions, they open us up and they broaden. And in many ways, they help us think outside the box. Dr. Fredrickson, Barbara Fredrickson's work is probably the most pioneering work on positive emotion. And there's lots of other people who've done good work too, but she's the one I would point you to the most. And her book, Positivity, is good. It's not a great read, but it's good. It's good enough. If you've got a critical thinking cap on and you have a sort of a basis of objectivism, you'll find value in it. It's a little vague in areas, and there are certain things that she calls emotions that clearly aren't emotions. They're thinking patterns, etc. But what positive emotion does is it has this broadening and what she calls a broadening and building effect. Yeah, we take in more information, and this increases creativity. And there are some interesting studies with children, and I know Jean Moroney's talked about this as well, but they seem to do these experiments on paper clips. They like using paper clips in psychological experiments. And if you engender positive emotion in one of the groups and the other group is just left with the paper clips, and you ask them to come up with as many creative solutions as possible, those who've been flooded with positive emotion will come up with far more solutions and clever ways of using it than the people who are just what we might define as neutral in the experiment. So positive emotion, as I said, they help you think outside the box. You can get a bird's eye view of your situation more when you're flooded with positive emotion. So when you're flooded with, say, gratitude or joy, etc. And there's this enhancement of creativity. They also really help build up your resilience skills. Because I'm going to talk in a bit about this technique called savouring. You can think of generating positive emotion as a way of building, when we're defining an earlier talk, resilience is the ability to draw upon internal and external resources. The ability to savour positive emotion is one of those internal resources that I'm talking about here. And we can dip into these resources when we need them. So not only are we experiencing positive emotion when we do things well, etc. in our life, but we can actually bring them on with certain techniques. And that has, massive benefits to our health, cardiovascular health in particular. A lot of positive emotion de-stresses the body. There are certain meditative techniques. If you do a lot of what we call resonance or coherent breathing, it releases, over time, it releases a lot of what we call DHEA. And you can think of, in the sort of vague terms, as DHEA is a little bit like the antithesis of cortisol, the stress hormone. So if you are, and resonant breathing is enhanced when you tap in and you savor positive emotion. So if you are doing that meditative breathing and then you bring in a positive memory that engenders positive emotion, you'll get even more DHEA released in your system that increases your heart rate variability and decreases the levels of stress, and increases cardiovascular health. Also, some of the research seems to show that positive emotion, when they're flooding in your body and you're experiencing them, and that the chemicals that go with them, increases coordination skills as well. There's some interesting research around there. It also really helps with interpersonal skills. We tend to be drawn to people who are experiencing positive emotion. Maybe there's a part of us that's like, hey, I want a bit of that. But people who are like that open the body, that open to experience, that open to it's open communication. What I'm trying to say is, when someone is really open, you're drawn to them, they're being more creative, they're more able to take on the information you're bringing and so on. So you create these kind of virtuous cycles. Also, engendering positive emotion, as I said, increases resilience. Optimism is a big part of that. We discussed optimism a week or two ago, and really helps goal orientation and so on. So there's this, you generate a virtuous upward cycle as these resources build and you increase your positive emotion. And then also, if you're anxious and stressed, bringing on positive emotion is actually a really good counter to return you to normal physiological functioning. And so I want this is what I'm giving this all as like a preface to some skills that I want to introduce to some of you who may be interested in that. And then also there's some research as well. You want to check out University of Pennsylvania, particularly Seligman's work. But there's this thing called the positivity ratio. And I don't know how they've done these experiments, so it requires further investigation. But they're basically claiming that a healthy relationship needs a ratio of 3 positive to negative emotions in interaction with people. So in many ways, the positivity ratio could also be that with your partner, you need to say 3 times as many nice things to them as nasty things for them for the relationship to flourish. And anything lower than that, you'll find that things get a bit rocky. And if it's 1-to-1, you're definitely going to lead to divorce. It's when they, I think they transcribe conversations between couples, etc., and they can kind of tell where a relationship's going. But they also find that in terms of the positivity ratio with positive and negative emotion, that you need to be having at least 3 times as many positive emotions as negative emotions to be what in their definition of flourishing. If you're at 1-to-1, you're going to be clinically depressed, and that's there's some interesting work there to look at. I haven't really studied that in enough detail to have firm grip on it, but the talk of the positivity ratio, I think it's quite interesting. And then it's worth asking yourself what some of these positive emotions do. So if we think about joy, joy often leads to an urge to play, to push the limits and become more creative. When we're experiencing joy, you embrace life, you love life, you go for it. Pride, for example, makes you think big, and so on. You can go through the positive emotions, and I've got a list actually here that I'm actually going to bring up. So this is a group of positive emotions that Miriam Akhtar, who wrote a book about positive psychology at the University of East London, she put this together. And this is what I'll often bring up after I've asked a group of people, how many positive emotions can you name? Now, some of these I don't think are actually emotions. I don't think faith is an emotion. I don't think trust is an emotion. I don't think interest is an emotion. I don't think inspiration is an emotion. I think there are emotions attached to those processes. But some of these are definitely emotions. And one thing that I like to do with people and ask them is like, when did you last feel any of these emotions? And then if there are certain areas that you think are missing, I would encourage you to try and generate them. And we're going to come to that in a bit. But if we take like gratitude, we've spoken about before, you can do gratitude lists for that. But when did you last do a specific exercise to generate pride in yourself? When did you write down all the things that you're proud about, etc.? And you can generate pride. I don't think fulfillment is an emotion. Again, I think there are emotions attached to it. So I'm saying that this list here from Miriam Akhtar isn't exactly what I would describe as all of them, but love, definitely. Awe is a very interesting positive emotion. And there are a few things that generate awe in me. I mean, you might say Atlas Shrugged. But and it's worth asking yourself, what are the things that generate awe? It's such an amazing feeling that it's worth seeking out. And I think what some of the research is showing is that it's great to be able to experience many different positive emotions and have a look at where the deficits are. Bliss, ecstasy, calm, peace are very important. Curiosity is definitely not an emotion. Again, that's something you do. Some of these just aren't, but like hope, optimism, and so on. This list, I just put it there for people to look at and try and get something from. I want to just move on to what we call savouring. So I've spoken in the past about gratitude lists, blessings journals, even gratitude visits. Have I spoken about those before? Where you write a letter to someone you're really grateful to, and then you try and meet up with them and you read it out. And it's, and what I love about objectivism's focus on justice is actually on the positive forms of justice. And actually it's often an act of justice to show your appreciation and gratitude to someone who's really helped you or inspired you in your life. But here's just an example, for example, around positive emotion. Just go and seek out your favorite person if you can. That person that you really love, like that platonic friend that you really enjoy the company of, and notice how you feel when you're around them. Notice what happens to your physiology and your state of mood. It's such a simple one, but if you want to lift yourself up, do that, because what you're ultimately doing is you're connecting with someone of real value to you, or one of the highest values to you. But it's very interesting, I think, to find how it makes you feel. Really enjoyed that myself. Certain things we need to do is, really put focus on and identify what you love doing and do more of it. I know it sounds so simple, but You know, oh, I can't do this today, I can't do that, I've got to just do this, just right. And then you never end up doing the things that you really love doing. You deny yourself getting into flow, etc. So the technique that is probably I found the most beneficial with clients, etc., is what we call savouring. And most of us know what savouring is in a culinary context. You know, with wine and food, we savor it, and that really means that we allow ourselves to really experience in a very mindful way the taste of something. And you can actually do this with positive memories. And savoring is a skill that is easiest to start with past memories, and then when you get better at savoring, you can actually really start to savor the present. And a lot of the better mindfulness techniques are often about learning to savor the present. And then after a while, you could even get to a place where you're savoring the future. So what I will often with the clients, when in early days of assessment and getting to know them, one of the most powerful exercises I do, because actually people find this much harder than you think, is I'll ask them to go away and come back the next week with 10 of their most positive memories from life. And because of the nature of my client group, who mostly come from, they're usually a long history of addiction and severe trauma, you'll often find that they don't have a huge amount of positive memories, or the positive memories they have are very tainted. But being able to identify them, and we use them as tools in their recovery, is actually really important. But the same principle will work for anyone. So you identify a positive memory. And this is the time in the group when I would like to ask if someone would like to volunteer, and we could go through a savoring experience. Yeah, Nikos, you want to do it?
Yeah, I've never done this. So I daydream often, but I've never done this in this conscious context. So I'm very curious to see how it goes.
So all I'm going to ask you to do, and then maybe we'll ask someone else as well, but I want you just to give me one of your top memories, best, most positive memories, if you're willing to share it. That is.
Yeah, it was a night in a bench staring at the sky in a beautiful island with a girl many years ago.
Okay. So have you got pen and paper?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I would do is I'd write out the age that you were, and sort of like lying in the, was it lying or sitting on the bench with?
Sitting on the bench.
With X. Yeah. And then what I'd write on the next line is I'd write image and then colon.
What's that?
That's what I'm getting to. So if you write image and colon, because what I'm doing is I'm giving you like a framework, and then you can use that framework to do many other positive memories. So image, and then what's the most positive image that represents that? So if you play that back like it's an episode of Netflix, and you're going to pause it now, not then, but now, at the most positive scene, what would that be?
Wouldn't that be still a scene from that night, though?
Yes, it would be, but it's more of a descriptive. So, like, I might say, one of my positive memories was the FA Cup final in blah, and then it would be okay. So what image represents the most positive part of that? And I might say, oh, receiving the tickets through the post, or watching them lift the cup, or whatever it is. So you want to narrow it down to what image, because this is crucial. It's crucial for your meditative practice.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got the image. So you describe in a line or two in detail the actual image.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you able to share that image?
Yeah. Not many people are going to get it because it's weird. It's actually, the image was when I was heading towards the ferry boat that would get me to that island. So I was actually alone.
Yeah.
So it was after a long trip, and I knew that it's only 2 hours of a ferry boat. You know what a ferry boat is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
2 hours of ferry boat trip till I get to that point that I so much wanted to get and visit her. So
sure.
That's like the mental image that the joy was actually that. Okay, we're almost there.
And already, I hope the rest in the group watching this right now saw how much more energized Nikos got when he described that image. You could actually see the positive emotion. You could see the energy in the body language. You could see the smile and the openness and the speed of thinking. Very interesting. So you now identified the most positive image that goes with that memory. Okay, so when you connect to the memory, the whole of the memory, and that particular image of waiting or getting to the ferry to get across, the excitement, you're on your own, what's the most positive belief you have about yourself right now when you connect to this?
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so if I did an example of, let's say I did an example of one of my getting together with Christina. Yeah, and I have an image of her meeting me at the airport, something like that in Norway. First time I went to visit Norway. Yeah, and her meeting me in the airport and all the excitement that goes with that. And when I reflect on that, most positive belief I have on myself is that I'm loved. You know, in that sense. Or if let's say another memory might be when I surfed in December, we went out in big chunky waves, and my surf instructor I've been with for a long time suggested to me, he said, I just want you to go out and catch one wave and come in. That's all I want you to do. And it was big and it was scary, and I went out and I did it, and I got that amazing adrenaline rush that you get and all that stuff. And I came in, and when I reflect on that now, I think I'm brave. You know, that would be the positive cognition that I associate with that memory.
Right.
The most positive cognition that I associate with that memory. So what I'm asking you to do is connect to the memory, in particular, that image of you waiting for the ferry, or that specific image you have, and then ask you, what is the most positive belief that you have about yourself?
It was mostly like, nothing can stop me now. Like, it's happening.
It's happening. Yeah. And that was the belief then, but what's the most positive belief about yourself now when you connect with it?
Oh, now is that exaltation and happiness can happen because it did happen.
Yeah. So therefore I am, or I can be
happy.
I can be happy. Great. Yeah. So you've got the image, you've got the positive cognition. So I want you to hold the image now. Tell yourself I can be
exalted, not even happy.
Yeah, I can be exalted. And then tell me what you're sensing, the sensation in your body right now. What's it making you feel?
A miniature of that. Yeah.
But what is that feeling? Is your heart rate going up? Is it warm? Is it cold?
No, it's more like something feeling here, but not the stress. It's more like...
Yeah, so, but what is that? I feel excited or calm?
More towards the excited side, I would say.
So, okay, because we tend to find that positive memories either fall in a more exciting category or more of a calming, peaceful one. So it's exciting. Is it warm or cold?
It's difficult to put it in these terms. I would say it's exciting.
But there's definitely a physical sensation that goes with every emotion. And what I would say to you, Nikos, is then this is an example of how mindfulness would really help you. When you can build up your interoceptive skills, you'll be able to notice what's going on in the body much more and tap into that. But when you were describing the image and all excited, and you were clearly excited, and you probably felt quite warm and all of that, yeah. What we were doing with all of this in identifying the image, the cognition, and the result of that cognition and image on how it makes you feel, is we're savoring.
Right.
You're going into and using an old memory to make you feel better in the present. And this really great exercise is to get a whole bunch of them. And then what you can do in time, the problem with it is the effect is transient with all emotions and good feelings and bad feelings, but good, they do wear off. And you'll often find that they don't work so well every time you go to them. So it's good. It's worth getting a list of positive emotions that you can use to affect your mood in that way. Yeah. And actually what's often great is to have, say, 5 that are exciting and 5 that are calming. Because sometimes we want to use savoring skills to give ourselves some energy. So if we again go back to when we were talking about resilience, and resilience is the ability to draw upon internal resources and external resources, sometimes we need that extra bit of energy to get over the line. And so savoring a positive memory that is exciting can lift you enough to then finish that essay or whatever it is, make that phone call you need to do, etc. But sometimes we need positive memories to calm us down. So there might be like, a great memory of being in the Aegean in that incredible sunlight that you get only in Greece, etc. And, and it just calms the system down, and you feel like, I feel relaxed now, and so on. Using savouring to do that. And it's worth building up, so you can have in your virtual back pocket positive memories that you can pull out and use.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then you can, once your savouring skills get better that way, you can actually start to really develop your mindfulness, or what we call introspective skills. Introspection being the ability to go back and into your mind, and interoception is the ability to really notice what's going on inside your body. Yeah, you can get really, if you can start savoring the present. So like you are having an experience that is exulting or joyful or calm or peaceful, and you can learn how to savor that in the moment. So you almost get like a doubling of the effect, because not only are you feeling it, but then you're enjoying it, you're really bringing focus to the experience of the experience, and that helps cement it in you, because there's definitely a correlation between the intensity of an experience and how well you remember it. So if you can start savoring the present, really great experiences that you have, like maybe you're at Ocon and you hear an amazingly powerful presentation that really lifts you, and while you're getting the goosebumps, really focus on the goosebumps and cementing that in you would be an example of savoring the present. And then you can actually you have to be careful with it, but you can actually get quite good at savoring the future as well. Just the future hasn't happened yet, so there are certain issues with that you have to be careful of. But the memory that you were savoring of the past is a memory of you actually savoring the future. You were all excited on that ferry boat about what was going to happen. So savoring, is a really powerful tool to counter what's known as the negativity bias, particularly in depressives. So savoring would be a tool that I would introduce to people who have a history of depression as one of the first things to use to counter depression. Now, savoring isn't going to reframe certain problems in your cognitive apparatus that really need to be looked at, but it's a great first step to make a difference. And really good for calming you. And when you start to learn how to do what we call resonant or coherent breathing, which is a very powerful technique for balancing the nervous system. There's a parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. When they're in balance is usually when you are at your most productive, and the prefrontal cortex is most online. When you get really good at practicing coherent breathing, you can actually really, and what that does is it increases your heart rate variance. And when your heart rate variance is increased, your resilience is higher, your nervous system can take much more, and you can still operate freely and well. If you want to increase the heart rate variance, you actually start to introduce some of those positive memories that you have and the feelings that go with them while you're practicing the coherent breathing. And you'll find if you monitor it, there's certain softwares that you can monitor your heart rate variance with, most common being heart. You'll find that your coherence, which is how well your nervous system is functioning, will rocket up. And you can see in real time just how powerful these kind of memories are for enhancing and also stabilizing. So you've been in a horrible car crash or something's really triggered you. you can use these savoring skills to bring you back into the moment and to just calm you down enough to be able to function again. So incredibly powerful in many different contexts. So certain examples and things that you can savor. You can, traditionally people love savoring the beauty of nature. And as objectivists, we know that actually the nature that we tend to savor and love is the nature that is kind of safe, that we look at the mountains, but we're looking at the mountains from the nicely built path and things like that. We don't tend to savor the rabid jungle with no exit. But the beauty of nature, landscapes, seasons, we love sunsets, rainbows, things like that. Great things to savor. Time spent with loved ones, certain friendships, the delight and innocence of young children. We often, can generate great positive memories. The wisdom of elders. Some of my best memories are some of the things I've learned. When I was a teenager and really excited about the world, there were certain adults whose influence and stuff that I really I got so much out of and really valued, and I can savor some of those memories. The skills of certain colleagues is really great when I see colleagues do things expertly. A bit like when Ayn Rand wrote in Atlas Shrugged about the bus driver expertly driving the bus near the beginning. That's something to savor. The kindness of other people can be a great source of savoring. Other things to savor, great books, great films, art, certain concerts you might have been to, pictures, paintings, or beautifully well executed design. I'm very fortunate that my partner, she's Scandinavian, so I get introduced. They really do have fantastic sense of design in those Nordic countries, particularly with furniture and things. Learn how to savor simple pleasures such as a hug or laughing. Fresh air, fresh bed linen is a nice one that people really, people often say when you get into, new sheets and things, like savor that moment. It's really nice. Don't just let it happen. Really, bask yourself in it and enjoy it. And then really, I think this is, ties into the ethics that we all subscribe to as objectivists, or hopefully we do. But really savor your own personal achievements, a sense of pride. Celebrate and celebrations of moments in your life. Maybe getting your PhD or getting your master's or getting married, or the birth of your first child, or certain birthdays or graduations, anniversaries, etc. These are all great things to savor. And then hopefully from this, and I'm actually going to send you through, I knocked together a PDF that I'll send to the group in a sec, of that you can use these as prompts to develop your savoring skills. And then there's certain exercises like, ask yourself, think of a time in the last week, and this is, maybe a bit harder at the moment in the pandemic, but think of a time in the last week when you really felt a positive emotion. And then allow yourself to go back to that moment and ask yourself, who are you with? What was happening? And then, write down as much as you can. Because that re-experiencing just feels so good. And what's really beautiful when you're with people of similar value, who share similar values to you, and you're in a group, you can get something called a positive multiplication effect. And I'll often do this in group work. But like, let's say all of us here in a group together, and I might ask Nikos to share a positive memory from his life, or an achievement he's really proud of. And you'll find that Nikos feels for that, and actually all the other people feel good in witnessing someone sharing something that they really value and have done really well. We call this the positive multiplication effect. And this happens all the time in great conversation, and when you hang out with people of similar values, etc. You get this this building up of each other's, and it's a fantastic experience to have that. So sharing with each other your savouring skills and these moments just feel great. They feel really great. And what you're doing is you're releasing a lot of serotonin and oxytocin, the bonding chemicals, the real feel-good chemicals. And then what I've got here at the end of this PDF that I'll put in the group in a sec is just it comes back to this concept of awe, which I don't think people, that's the wrong thing to say. A lot of people I ask, they struggle with awe, and they would like to have more awe in their life. And I always find it a fun exercise to really think about. And there's two researchers from University of Pennsylvania have studied something they call the overview effect. And the strongest overview effect that they've come across is the feeling of awe and wonder that astronauts experience, seeing Earth from space. Now, that's not something that most of us are ever going to be able to do, but that's probably the strongest they've found it in people so far. But using that as like that, I think a lot of people can imagine being in a spacecraft and looking back and having this amazing sense of awe. Some people probably it's terror. I know in the 18th century, a lot of the carriages that went through the Alps, the people would close the curtains. They didn't want to see the views because they found it terrifying. There's some interesting essays back in the day on the concept of the sublime. And the sublime nowadays we use in a really positive way, but for a long time, sublime was too much for people. I think they were scared because they didn't know how to conquer or feel safe in those kind of environments. But I think we do now. Ask yourself, when did you last feel awed by something? And how could you feel awe more often, and explore that? Because it is such a fantastic, I think so anyway, fantastic emotion to experience. And very powerful. To conclude today, I often keep coming back to Martin Seligman's PERMA model. And the PERMA model stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. And P for positive emotion is very important. If you want to flourish and be happy, you do need to experience a lot of positive emotion. The dangerous thing about positive emotion is if you just seek it for the sake of it without having really earned it in the way that you would hope. You want positive emotion to be the cherry on the cake. Hedonism is just chasing the feeling for the sake of it without without having earned it, and we have to be careful of that. So there is the hedonic element of positive emotion, which is important, but it can't be an end in itself. It can't be the only thing. And people have to be very wary of that. Maybe it's time, this is my favorite part, this is the bit that I savor, is the Q&A, because what I love about the Q&A is I have to think on my feet a lot of the time.
Looks like I'll go also with the first question.
Okay.
Actually, I have more than one, but I'll anyway. So the question is, what's the defining line between savoring and what sometimes we call LARPing, so role-playing, but in a bad way, where what you do is you escape reality. And to put it in more objectivist terms, if you try to recreate, let's say, this emotion, couldn't you say that you're trying to get an effect without the cause? So let me give a simple example. Let's say, oh, back then when I graduated, I was a great guy. Now I am a lazy bum. But how nice was it then? And I'll recreate it. That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, what if this savoring actually leads to a sadness? And I'll give a specific example. There's this very famous basketball player, one of the best in history, who died in a car accident when he was in his 30s. And his mother was, and that was like around 30 years ago. And his mother was, I was reading an interview the other day because she's having like a museum with the history of this guy's life. And she says that quite often she enjoys watching old tapes with his best games. And I'm thinking, but doesn't this bring back bad memory? And because that your kid is dead, which is the worst thing that could grossly happen. And there's also an interesting thing, scene in Atlas Shrugged. It's, I think in the chapter, The Immovable Movers, it's Dagny in the beginnings. She doesn't know the whereabouts of Francisco. She is listening to Richard Halley, which was the the music they were listening together. And then she sees a photo of him in the newspaper and says, don't read it, don't read it. But she reads, it's one of these stories with his ridiculous affairs with other women. And the combination of the music that brings back all these hard, strong memories that she had with him. And she ends up crying, and there's this pain which kind of overtakes her body.
Yeah.
So, yeah, your comments on these things, please.
Well, do you remember when I said that I'll often give the exercise to clients and they say like, no problem. And then they come back the next week and they found it really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's because so many people's memories are bittersweet or compromised. So I would never, with a client, I would never encourage them to use one of those memories that is complicated. So in the case of Dagny there, there's too much pain involved in that one to generate the kind of effects that we're hoping to do there. So, and I think you'll find that if you successfully are savoring things that were good for you and you had done well, etc., then you're not cheating the system. You know, that you're actually just reliving something that you had done well and you had earned it and you had earned that emotion, and you're re-tapping into that. The case that you said at the beginning is quite an interesting one. You know, oh, I did really well at my graduation, but now let's say I'm become a failure and blah, blah, blah. You could use that to help you, give you some energy to in the process of changing back to being a better person. But it's not like a substitution. It's not going to I am a really good guy because I did that. No, it's using it as a tool to give you some kind of boost, etc. And that's what I mean. Like, you have to be careful with the whole with positive emotion in that way,
Right.
using it in that way, because it can't substitute for, as that's why Seligman is always saying it's the least important of the 5 key components of flourishing, but it is important, and it's not something that is, you know, it's also one of the greatest rewards. If you experience joy because you've written Atlas Shrugged and it's, you know, sold millions, and you know that you're making a tremendous impact and you're, you know, really proud of that, then that's the reward. How amazing is that?
What you mentioned initially with the negative emotions,
yeah,
I think it was in Nietzsche, but probably not only Nietzsche. He was talking about the gossip, something like the power of gossip. And basically it means people savoring negativity, or other people use this stereotype of, you know, with Sex and the City, one of the girls has broken up and they all come together and drink and watch a romantic film and they cry and they almost enjoy it. They almost kind of find something bonding in this emotion. Or I don't know, the stereotype, like the male equivalent, where our team lost, we go to the pub and we discuss about this game throughout the night and we drink beers, and I mean, that's the light version, but I think the gossip and the negativity, like that you thrive in negativity, is something that unfortunately we see in a lot of people. So what's happening there?
What's going on there most of the time is that they are getting an adrenaline rush from that. So in that moment, they are taken away from the pain of what's actually going on, and it's like, or it's like, I feel really alive. You know, so bitching is a classic one. People will bitch and take other people's inventory to make themselves feel better, but they'll find that it doesn't last very long at all. And that's the tragedy. You know, there's a real come down off that very, very quickly. In the same way that when the kids at school learn, unfortunately, learn a form of self-esteem that's not real, that every time they get a question right and get you know, sir, 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 and they answer the question and they get that little tiny little buzz, and then they chase that. It's the little buzz. And people, when they gossip and bitch and stuff, they definitely get a little buzz for a while, but they often feel that guilty afterwards. So many people report and say, do you know what, actually, afterwards I felt pretty terrible, and there's a crash from it, and actually it wasn't really of any high value.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we have 2 questions in the, and now 3 questions in the chat. What is positive emotion? Is it just brain chemistry? And what is the purpose of positive emotion? Is it to motivate us?
Yeah, it's to get the purpose of positive emotion is to get stuff done, but to get stuff, and it's the reward of having done stuff well as well. So positive emotion, all of them motivate us to act, and positive emotion. If you look in the PDF, you'll see some examples of what different positive emotions do. But in many ways, yeah, it is a form of brain chemistry, and there are certain things released like oxytocin and serotonin. You know, very nice feel-good chemicals. Anandamide is another one. All those things, you know, runner's high chemicals that are released, etc. They're all brain chemistry. But remember, we are more than just the brain chemistry. Emotions are the sort of intersection between our cognition and our body sensations.
Betty has a follow-up. Betty, go live.
Yeah, hello guys. Hello Josh. Thanks
Hiya.
again. The reason I was asking, because you said something a while ago that made me think, if we're just chasing the positive emotion, then that itself is not productive. In other words, we get into the loop of just searching for another feel good, whether it's another drink or another smoke or another cupcake or something that just passes. So I'm thinking the positive emotion that exists to make us be productive, not as something that we should search for as itself.
Absolutely. So when you're savoring, you're using it as a means to another end. The end is to get stuff done, or to take you over the line, and so on. But sometimes positive emotion is an end in itself as well. Joy, the joy of being alive, you know, and is the reward of having done things really well. But if you want to go into that side of things in more detail, I really implore you to listen to Dr. Binswanger's talks on it's on the Ayn Rand campus on emotions. They're fantastic, parts 1 and part 2, and that will give you a much better understanding of the relationship between emotions and values.
Let me ask one more question to Josh, and it has to do with this positivity ratio.
Yeah.
I was very surprised by what you said, the 1-on-1 ratio, because I think there are times, not only in my life, but in most people's life, where the ratio is 10 negative, 1 positive. But you said that maybe even a 1-on-1 ratio could lead to something like a depression. How is that possible when most people have negative emotions all the time, or negative thoughts all the time?
I think what the research shows, and there was an interesting bit in Dr. Binswanger's emotions talk, where he noticed when he really introspected that he had something like 50 different emotions when he went to the shops. And I think if you are just remember that they're not always, there's an intensity to emotions, and negative emotions tend to have a higher intensity than positive emotion. I think most people can relate to that, and because they often need something needs acting on now. But what you find is that amongst, as I was saying, I'm not particularly done a huge amount of research or know a huge amount about the positivity ratio. So that's why I was saying it's something that I implore people to research more. But I think what you'll find is that even when you're really negative and down, there's all sorts of positive emotions going on all the time. Nice cup of tea, things like that. There's many things that are going on there.
Have you heard of the rampage of appreciation?
Never. Don't know what that is. The rampage of appreciation. No idea.
Do you want to tell us, Betty?
Yeah, when you were speaking a while ago about focusing on positive things to deliberately bring about a positive emotion, it made me think of like the gratitude list stuff. And I don't know if you've heard of Abraham Hicks. They have this law of attraction education, and they talk about finding something positive and then deliberately savouring it, and then finding something else positive, and then just going round and round in a loop, and they call it the rampage of appreciation. And that sounded a lot like what you were speaking about with the savouring stuff.
It may well be, there may be crossover there, but I don't know.
Yeah, because the savouring, I mean, it ties into the whole gratitude thing, doesn't it?
Well, gratitude is one way of savouring. It's one form of savouring. And it's one way of developing, and it's very powerful. As I say, I write gratitude and blessings journals every day because they have such an effect on me, and there's so many things for me to be grateful for. The
point of savouring then is to just pull you into a positive state, or to generate a positive emotion.
Yeah, that's the point. And then but as you said earlier, you have. And as I was saying earlier, you have to be careful about why you're doing it, but they're incredibly useful tools.
Yeah, because I thought it was interesting when Nikos was saying that the whole cause and effect thing, because ultimately we want to be creating our own emotions, not by just generating the abstract emotion, but by actually doing something that we're responsible for, and then having the cause of the result, and then having the positive emotion as a reward for what we've actually done.
Yeah, absolutely. And what savouring is it's an extra bit of reward for the thing that you'd already got rewarded for. So when, for example, if I'm savouring something that I've done really well and I'm proud of, I've earned that.
Yeah.
I earned it I earned it when I did the thing well in the past, and I'm getting some reward. It's like some interest from that later on.
So it's like the icing on the cake. So rather than sort of going into a fantasy and then just sitting thinking about the beautiful sunset, it's doing something, and then you're just reliving it for yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can bring in the positive emotion, for example, when you're meditating, etc. And that has very good benefits on it's a means to an end. So when I'm doing that, I'm increasing my heart rate variability. When I increase my heart rate variability, my prefrontal cortex is more in line. When my prefrontal cortex is more in line, I'm able to think more rationally and come up with better and more creative solutions to things that I'm working on. So that that would be one example. Like when I was writing my dissertation last summer, I would do 10-15 minutes of meditation and savouring, and as soon as I finished that, boom, I was ready to go. Totally focused on the task. So it was a really powerful psychological skill to have.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
To use it.
Thanks, Betty. And I think that was important clarification that there's always that's a means to an end, and the end is doing something meaningful and something good and important. Yeah. Right. So thanks again to Josh. I don't see any other question around, so we can let him relax and enjoy his Saturday evening. I think, again, as every week, I have 3 pages of notes. So many thanks to Josh. So we'll be back again on Monday. Just to remind people, specifically, Betty says something nice. I savor your talk, Josh. I second that. So again, just a reminder for this Monday, pre-send your questions to Brazil. And also, could I please encourage you to go and have a look for past events with Josh in the Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube page. And I will put the link. I mean, you go to YouTube, you put Ayn Rand Center UK, you find the YouTube page. So many thanks again. Have a great Saturday evening, savoring good emotions, and see you in future events.